Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third staging of the public sector debate competition, including those joining us on social media. I am Tamika Gunmighty, Communications Specialist here at the Transformation Implementation Unit. The competition over the years has brought transformational ideas, camaraderie, and excitement to the public service. The last two stagings had some very interesting and thought-provoking moods and arguments. We are excited at what this year will bring. Our debate champions from last year will not be participating this year, and so we are looking forward to a brand new champion who will take the trophy and bragging rights this year. Stay tuned for our matches, which will be played on Tuesdays and Wednesdays leading up to the finale, which will be played on July 30th. The Ministry of Local Government is unavoidably absent, but the show must go on today. So, starting us off will be the Ministry of National Security. I know you are all excited to get the match started, so I will invite the Ministry of National Security to introduce themselves.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Anish. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Anisha Blake and I'm currently the data scientist and manager at the Ministry of National Security and the first speaker for the opposing team this morning.
A pleasant morning to you all. I am Davita Scarlett, team captain for the Ministry of National Security and the second speaker for the opposing team.
Pleasant good morning. My name is Jomoy Phillips, and I am the reply speaker for the opposing team.
Thank you so very much, Minister of National Security. They will be delivering arguments opposing the moot. Be it resolved that decisions relating to the use of mobile phones in schools should be determined exclusively by school administrators. Our adjudicators for today's match are our partners from the Jamaica Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE. Judges, please introduce yourselves.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I'm Cleveland Tomlinson, and I will be your chief adjudicator for the match.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roshana Jarrett, and I'll be one of your ring judges this morning.
Pleasant morning, everyone. The name is Javon Downey. I'll also serve as a wing adjudicator.
Thank you so very much, judges. Returning team, Minister of National Security, they're familiar with the rules. So I turn the debate over to the judges. Minister of National Security, all the best.
Thank you, Mrs. Gunmighty. We are going to take the speeches from the team from the Ministry of National Security. The proposition team is not here with us today, so per convention, what we will do, the panel will hear the first speech and the second speech from the team that's present. Please note that the panel can interrupt you at any time with questions, and you are required to answer the questions. This is not similar to a POI where you are allowed to decline the POI. You're not allowed to decline any question that's coming from the panel because in essence the panel is playing the role of the opposing team so that we can assess the rigor of your argumentation. The cross-questioning period will not take place because there is no other team in this match, and also the reply speeches will not be allowed. Following that, the adjudication panel, through me, will give some general feedback on the quality of arguments we heard and how well you responded to. But with that said, you will proceed to the next round. The moot for the match reads, be it resolved that decisions relating to the use of mobile phones in schools should be determined exclusively by school administrators. We'll invite the first speaker, who will speak for 7 minutes.
Do you hear that? Do you hear? Can you hear that? Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, fellow debaters, and audience, I am Dr. Renisha Blake, the first speaker for the opposition. The echoes of exclusivity and derealization linger in the room. It is loud, yet empty. The points of the proponents are null and void, inconsequential in this debate, if I may. Today, Team MNS convenes with you to strongly disagree with and argue against the motion. Be it resolved that decisions relating to the use of mobile phones in schools should be determined exclusively by school administrators. Instead, we, the opposition, maintain that decisions regarding mobile phone use in schools should not solely rest in the hands of school administrators. It should be a collective decision involving the school board, the government of Jamaica, parents, and other key stakeholders in a whole-of-government progressive manner. This approach ensures a balanced, fair, and inclusive framework that benefits all parties involved, especially the students. In my speech, I will, 1, demonstrate the flaws in the proposition's case and debunk it. 2, highlight why the opposition's case is more feasible and actionable with clear lines of reasoning. And thirdly, introduce a framework that is evidence-based and progressive given the situational analysis that we've diligently conducted. First, let's dive in the crux of the argument made by the proponents of this motion. They assert that school administrators in Jamaica should have the exclusive right to decide on the use of mobile phones in schools. They argue that administrators, with their experience and authority, are best equipped to make these decisions. However, let's unravel this argument with a touch of wit and wisdom. Imagine, if you will, a ship navigating the turbulent waters of education. The proponents suggest that only the captain or esteemed school administrators should hold the map and make all the decision. Ludicrous. While it's true that the captain has a wealth of experience, would it not be sheer folly to ignore the seasoned sailors, the lookout with the best view of the crow's nest, and the voices of the engine room who keep the ship running? Ladies and gentlemen, let us examine who do we define as school administrators, as this was not clearly done by the proposing team. We're looking at 3 main roles. We're looking at the principal, the vice principal, the head of department, or the dean of discipline. For context, we propose that these administrators should not solely decide on the use of mobile phones in schools. However, for context, let us define, taken from the Education Act, what we propose. And I quote, "Every scheme which provides for the management of a public educational institution shall contain provisions for the constitution, powers, and duties of a board of management for the education institution to which the scheme relates." A board of management, otherwise called the school board, ladies and gentlemen, not school administrators. Ladies and gentlemen, judges, fellow debaters, let's examine what obtains. The government representing the broader societal interest.
Question.
Sure.
I think it's generally appreciable that in the context of this motion, that school administrators would include the school board, in as much as the principal sits on the school board and carries out the decision of the school board. There's no distinction between them, really.
Actually, there is a distinction, if I may, based on the Constitution and based on the policies. For example, the security and safety in school policy distinguishes between school administrators, which I would have defined to be the principal, vice principal, etc. Those individuals are in the daily running of the school. You wouldn't necessarily, and while we agree that the principal may sit on the school board or a designate, there's a clear line between school administrators and the school board, as defined by law and by the Constitution. Thank you. Now, in my speech, I will continue to demonstrate the flaws in the proposition's case and debunk it. I will also highlight why the proposition's case is more feasible and introduce our pulse framework to give some life to the argument. Now, let us look at the fact that the government, representing the broader societal interest, has a responsibility to ensure that policies are inclusive. As quoted by the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, a principal needs a good chairman to make a school function well. The role of the school boards cannot be undermined in critical decision making. Again, we must distinguish based on what is written in the law and be reminded of the moot that said school administrators, not school administrators, including school boards. We have to make a distinction here. Now, there is an excerpt from the Security and Safety Policy Guidelines from the Ministry of Education and Youth, subsection 3.9, which states, with the increase in the use of technology, go ahead? Okay. Now, what I will say is that we should not overlook the importance of shared government. Go ahead.
We contend that it's not appropriate to take a blanket decision in not allowing school administrators to make that determination with respect to the use of school phones in schools, because there are certain specificities or what we call idiosyncrasies relating to some institutions, the era in which they relate, etc. And we don't think that a broad decision laid out at the policy level would be helpful in that regard. What if the school exists in a violent-prone area where perhaps the use of phones by the students after school, before school, could be helpful? How do you contend with that?
So I would say, first of all, that you are contradicting your first speaker's statement, now coming with this based on our arguments. And what I will say is that we, too, we're not proposing a blanket policy. What we are saying is that it should not rest exclusively with administrators, which I must remind you is the moot that we're debating here, but the school board. To conclude, the argument of exclusivity is akin to saying the captain should sail the ship alone, ignoring the valuable input from the crew. A successful journey and effective school policies require the wisdom of many, not the dictates of one or one set of administrators. So let's not sail our ship of education blindly. Let's navigate together, leveraging the collective insight of the entire school. Let's champion an inclusive and progressive approach. Thank you.
Thank you, first speaker. Let's take the presentation from the second speaker.
Oh, mercy. Oh, God.
All right, you may begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges, and the lacking thereof of what should have been our worthy opponents. I am Davita Scarlett, and as the second speaker for the opposition, I stand before you to assure you, as our first speaker did, that it is only through an inclusive policy-based approach that we can navigate the turbulent waters that may present themselves in our educational landscape. These waters can be treacherous, and a captain who takes no word from their fellow sailor as to the potential dangers before them is taking a gamble. We are not of the view that we should ever gamble with the future of our nation. Our children, who are all under our care, cannot be left to the whims and devices of only school administrators already carrying the pressure of running the school. Time wasted is time lost, my judges. The clock cannot be turned back when the decision of once... All right, let me just. Firstly, as was stated, they are all on the school board. So we have already taken into account the diverse perspectives that are available to us. And what we are trying to do now is to chart you towards a framework that will help you to understand how this can be achieved. So let me rather chart you on a course that is far away from the dangers that are ever present and kind of bring it back to what we're trying to let you understand. Let's take a moment to delve into the School Improved Planning Committee, which is a key mechanism for policy development at the school level. The committee, as outlined in the school board handbook, is tasked with identifying priorities, analyzing key areas, drafting plans, consulting stakeholders, monitoring implementation, and reporting progress. It is a structured process that fosters collaboration among the entire school, which includes the school administrator, the school board, and the entire school community. But why stop there? What the team is trying to propose to you, judges, is the adoption of the PULSE framework, which is the participatory and unified leadership for school excellence. PULSE embodies our commitment to inclusive decision-making and cohesive leadership, ensuring that policies reflect the diverse needs and perspectives of our school community. Under polls, decisions are not made in isolation by school administrators only, but are instead the result of an active engagement with all stakeholders, to include the parents, teachers, the school board, and everybody alike. So through participatory decision making, unified leadership, strategic planning, which is where now we will involve research, so we will take in account other schools, whether in volatile areas or unvolatile areas, to see how best we can implement these policies that are not only effective but ethical.
Would you accept the argument that the school administration is an extension or an extension of the board, given that their duty, their mandate is to carry out whatever decisions would have been made at the board level? Or is it a case where they operate in isolation of each other, hence the need to bring them together in this situation?
Oh, thank you for that question, judges, but I want you to understand that the school administrators have a function and their sole duty.
You can't
And
tell
they-
me that and you didn't give
Oh,
me that.
I thought that was clearly understood. Our apologies, but they do carry the function that will benefit the school on a whole. They do not report to themselves. Whilst they make decisions, they do, in the end, report to the school board, which may involve an representative from the administrator body.
A follow-up question then. Given that the school board and the school administration have separate roles and responsibilities, could you then identify or distinguish those roles and responsibilities, which further now bolsters your point as it relates to why we need to bring them together on this particular issue?
Most definitely, and that is found under the PULSE framework that we are trying to adopt, which is, and let me just reiterate, is to have not just one set of people making decisions. It is supposed to be an inclusive decision. So the school administrators and the school board will come together to form the PULSE, which will now be the governing body to make the decisions collectively. I hope you're understanding.
No, but I'll ask the question again after.
All right. So let's take this scenario into account. So there was a young lady, Sarah, whose medical emergency went undressed due to the inability to communicate with her parents. The government could be held liable for negligence and breach of duty of care because of several factors. These include oversight and responsibility, vicariously liable for school administrators' failure to provide adequate guidance, breach of duty care, and foreseeability of harm. The outcome of the lawsuit depends on the specific circumstances of the case, including evidence, legal arguments, and court application, all of which would lead to a tarnished reputation for the Ministry of Education, making it critical that a multi-stakeholder approach must be taken in account in order for an instructive decision-making framework to be seen. So, judges, Sarah's life could be spared by the pulse. And I want you to just feel the pulse at this moment. What we're trying to say is that the decisions relating to the use of mobile phones in schools should not be determined exclusively by school administrators alone. We're not saying that they cannot put forward recommendations or suggestions. We're just saying that the decision should not rest entirely upon this group of people whose functions or duties are limited as opposed to the school board. Instead, they should be the result of a collaborative and inclusive process that engages all stakeholders. By embracing this participatory approach, the polls, we can develop policies that promote responsible mobile phone usage while fostering a safe and supportive learning environment from all. And this is where we will have a pulse. So, judges, as I'm about to rest my case, but what I want, my opponents not being here kind of steer the ship, but let me remind you or just point out that them not being here has caused the ship to not leave the shore. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Yes. I'm still going back to my previous question because I think one of your team members would like to address it. But before we get into the details, let's start with what currently obtains in the status quo as it relates to policies such as cell phone usage.
All right, so what currently obtains is there is a school improvement planning committee that is a part of the school board, and the decisions made as it, well, in what should obtain rather, because what is prescribed in text, we realize
What is happening in
is,
person.
yes, and in the school improvement planning, it will take in consideration issues such as cell phones in school and other issues outside of this realm as well. So that is what obtains, and they will do their research, and the decision is then, from the research, the varying things to take into account would then be brought to the school board. So similarly structured to the school board, the SIP committee has all the stakeholders on deck, the parents, students, community representatives, and ministry representatives as well, such as pretty much in the same structure as the school board, in addition to administrators and non-administrative staff from the school.
So what is so flawed about that system why we need to implement the pulse?
So it's not, so if you're listening correctly, we're not saying that what obtains is so flawed. What we're saying is that it needs to be strengthened. So we're strengthening it in order to ensure that, like administrators who should be using a scientific method of decision making rather than being an arbitrary decision maker, and based on what would have seen happening in terms of when administrators choose to make decisions, wrong decisions are made, and that is case inside at Kensington Primary with the young lady who's here was she was forced to trim. We have other cases where students were actually haircut was cut. We have the case in St. James recently when the principal made a decision and then the board coming out to say that we didn't sanction this decision, and then the principal all of a sudden couldn't remember who on the administrative team made the decision. So when you have a structure in place to amplify the work of the SIP committee, a framework on how decisions should be made, then it would allow for all biases to be cast out. And for the fact that, while we didn't mention it because our opponents weren't here, decisions made by administrators, if wrong, as pointed out in the scenario, has legal implications for the government, not just the school, but the government and ministry. Therefore, if the ministry is liable, why then leave the full decision-making arbitrarily in the hands of the administrator without suggesting a platform or a method that would lead to a decision that is likely to be the one that the ministry would make, which is why we propose a policy approach.
All of that what just happened a while ago. I don't know if my fellow judges had gotten that from the presentation, because when you are now explaining to me what obtains, why you need to change or why we need to improve, then that gives me a clearer understanding as to why you're defending this. If you come with a defense for something, especially the fact that we're taking an inclusive approach, because now that you're explaining to me that there is in fact a system in place, and who those people are that form that committee, and what their roles on that committee entail, then that puts for us into perspective what we're dealing with and what you're defending.
So we're going to wrap up. We're going to deliberate, and then I'll come back to you with our feedback generally from the panel. Sure. Yes. Thank you.
But you guys did say
Ladies and gentlemen, judges, do you feel the pulse? The arguments have been made by the Minister of National Security. The judges will now break to deliberate and come back to us with their decision. Stay tuned.
Give me a minute, all right? Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So, thank you. So, what I will do is to give feedback and to essentially dissect the case that we heard from the team. They will advance to the next round, and that is per the convention. That is consistent with the policy that guides the competition, that where a team does not have an opposing team in the match, that team will proceed to the next round. So well done and congratulations on that. Let's talk about what we heard in the debate, but first let's look at the moot. Be it resolved that decisions relating to the use of mobile phones in schools should be determined exclusively by school administrators. We got a description from the ministry that decisions relating to the use of phones should be inclusive. In fact, they said that it should be a balanced framework that takes into account the perspectives of a wide cross-section of stakeholders. And we think that that was a very fair position to take, and that's what the burden in the debate required them to take. You know, why is it that the decision relating to the use of mobile phones in schools should be inclusive, should be left to the schools, or should be made at the broad policy level by the Ministry of Education, or broader, the Cabinet or the government of Jamaica? So we thought it was a bit strange to hear the significant differentiation being proposed by the ministry of what the role of the school board is from the role of principals, vice principals, and other stakeholders inside the school as administrators. We thought that that was not what the substantive differentiation that was required for them to prove. And they quoted the Education Act. So in the Education Act, there is a distinction between the board, the school board, as we colloquially refer to it as, and between principals, vice principals, etc. But in the Education Act, you know, it says, and I have it here, the board as an administrator. The board sets policies, and principals and vice principals carry out those policies. There is not a significant differentiation relevant to this debate between the school board and principals. The school board decisions are carried out as a conduit through the principal. So it was not helpful in the context of this debate to spend a whole lot of time making a differentiation between decisions taken by principals and decisions taken at the board level. In fact, the Education Act, Section 89.1, tells you that the principal will carry out those policy directives on behalf of the board. So the debate should have been about whether it is appropriate for decisions relating to the use of phones to be made within the school by the school board, the principal, the school board, and other representatives of the school board, or the decision be made at the ministry level. Should it be that the ministry sits at Hero Circle and make a broad policy directive that says all schools across Jamaica should not allow the use of phones in their schools? Or should the ministry say, well, we're not going to make that decision at the broad ministerial level. We're going to leave it up to the respective school boards to make that determination. Because perhaps there are specificities, or what we refer to as idiosyncrasies, within the zones in which these individual schools exist. For example, if a school exists in a violent-prone area, it is quite appreciable as to why students perhaps would need to use their phones before school and after school, relative to a school that is in a very well-secured area, close to the ministry, close to security mechanisms. Then you will find that in that case, a broad decision being laid out by the ministry would not necessarily account for those idiosyncrasies. If we had a proposition team that correctly interpret the moot as a differentiation between broad ministerial policy and policies made within the school, then it would have been very problematic for the position taken by the ministry. If we had a proposition team that interpreted the moot as the opposition did, then the panel would have had to adjudicate it as such and recognize that, well, both teams in that instance would not have properly interpreted what is required to come out of the moot. So again, in summation, there was not a necessity for the opposition team to make a differentiation between the school board and the principal, because the moot is generally referring to decisions taken within the school, collectively by the school board, and whoever composes or whoever sits on that school board. So we think that for us, that was a bit problematic for the opposition team, and we're very much willing to discuss further outside for greater clarity if necessary. But outside of that, we thought there needed to be a greater substantive explanation. In as much as you seek to make this determination between the school board and the principal, why is what is happening in the status quo problematic? And I remember the third speaker saying, well, it's not that it is problematic, but it needs strengthening. I think it is appreciable that if something needs strengthening, then there must be some inadequacies in the status quo. For your argument to be far more convincing, you have to tell us what those inadequacies are, the implication of those inadequacies, and what consequences emerge from those inadequacies. We didn't get that. So to help to bolster your case going into the next debate, it's important that if you are amplifying, enhancing any kind of mechanism, you tell us what is problematic with that mechanism now and why it's not achieving the optimal that you'd want, and how this enhancement that you are proposing gives us that optimal that we'd want. We think that that could have enhanced the case. But overall, we think very clear, well-spoken speakers, and we think that they're a team to look out for in the next round. All right, so thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and have yourselves a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Cleveland. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the first match. Congratulations, Team Ministry of National Security. Remember, you can keep abreast of the matches by following us on social media at TIU Jamaica on Instagram and X, TIU Jamaica on Facebook. We hope you enjoyed the debate and, more importantly, that you learned something. You may stay tuned. Our next match will begin at 11:35. Thank you.